I directed a production of The Boys Next Door for Ace Theater. How I came to direct that play is kind of a tale in itself. I had given up on theater and been pursuing screenwriting and working in motion pictures. Then I got contacted from a couple people at Ace Theater about possibly workshopping a screenplay I was writing at the time for a Dracula movie called Renfield, which eventually became the movie Renfield the Undead. So I thought it was an interesting idea, and what we decided to do instead of workshopping the screenplay was actually write a stage version of the screenplay, and that's what I did. And we began casting, and that's how Glenn Lambert came to Ace. That's how Sam Martinez came to Ace. Was I had cast them in my workshop production of what was then called The Curious Mr. Renfield, which is now called Renfield the Dracula play. During that production, the original director of Boys Next Door backed out, and they were looking for a director. And I said I'd be willing to direct it if they wanted me to, and they mulled it over and finally said, yeah, you can direct it. I had seen the production at the Alley some years ago in the mid-1990s. I worked with one of the actors that played in that show on a commercial he was directing about kids that would snort paint and turn into zombies. He played the Barry Kemper role. So I was familiar with the play, and when they told me I could direct it, I got a copy of the Hallmark movie, and I watched them, and I remember the play, and I remember thinking, this is touchy subject matter, and that I had not seen the play done to its full potential. It's written, even though it says it's not, it's written as a mockery. So many times you'll see productions of The Boys Next Door, and they play to mocking the boys instead of celebrating the boys' differences. And I knew that if I was going to direct this show, that I wanted to celebrate these boys' lives and their individuality. That everybody has limitations. Theirs are just more pronounced than everybody else's. So that was what I had in my mind when I began casting the show. In casting the show, I knew that I would need strong actors that could portray these boys realistically without going into a burlesque, play the damage but play the soul. It's something I was familiar with because I was working on this Renfield thing, and Renfield is a very damaged person, and the key to playing Renfield is to keep the soul pure but acknowledge the damage. So I knew what I was looking for because I had had experience with the Renfield character in Dracula. So it was during the, I guess we were building the platforms for the reading for the Renfield play, and Glenn was in my Renfield play, and he said, I want to audition for Boys Next Door, but I don't want to do it in front of the people. And I said, okay, are you ready now? And he said, yeah. So we went like in the scene shop of Ace by the bathroom, and he did his Norman Belansky, and I didn't tell him, but I had cast him right then. Later that same day, Sam Martinez, who was in the Renfield play also, he was playing the judge, comes to me and says, I want to be in your Boys Next Door, but there's only one role I want, and that's Norman. So I was just like, oh, because they're both brilliant actors, but both have very different styles and very different approaches to acting. And I knew that Glenn was my Norman, so I didn't say anything to Sam. I wanted to get through the reading of Renfield, so we did, and it was a success. For a first stab at it, it did everything it was supposed to do. The interesting thing was that the reading of the Renfield play happened the first night of auditions, because I was stepping in for another director. It was already scheduled, so I had to live with his schedule. Jennifer Brawley Adams, I think is her name, was the producer for Ace at the time, and she oversaw the first night of auditions. I did peek my head in at the intermission of the Renfield play and introduced myself as the director of the play and told them that I would be back tomorrow if they wanted to come and read for me personally. And some of them did. She gave me her notes, and then the next night I went in and everybody read it. A couple of the people that auditioned for me had already done The Boys Next Door, and they did what they'd done previously, which there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if it's working for you, go with it. But it wasn't working for me. It was burlesque. It was playing twitches and all kinds of stuff, like what Lewis does in our play, mocking the girl with the twitch. That's what some of the people auditioning for Arnold were actually doing to be that character, and that was wrong for what I was doing with the show. So we made it through the first night of auditions. Well, it was the second night. It was the first night for me, but it was really the second night of the auditions. And I told everybody that if they could give me 10-15 minutes, I would have the cast ready. So I sat down with Rena Alvis, who was going to be my stage manager on Boys Next Door. She was the stage manager on the Renfield reading. Most of Boys Next Door and the magic it brought came because it came from my Renfield play. That's where the core of everything was assembled. In fact, the only people that were not involved in the Renfield play that were involved in Boys Next Door were James Reed and Louis Crespo. Louis was doing another thing going on at ACE at the time, I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. And I knew that, and I knew that he would not be available for the first 2 weeks of our rehearsal. But he was the best when it came to Arnold. He was very green, and I knew I would have to be a little rough with him at times to get him to break some of his musical theater things that he does, his mannerisms. But I figured, you know, let's give him a chance, because he was the only one that read Arnold as a person and not as a character. Lucian P. Smith was actually the hardest role to cast because it's written for an African-American actor, and we had no African-Americans show up. James Reed had really impressed me. He had read for everything and was a brilliant actor, and I wanted to use him, and I wanted to feature him. But the only role that I could slip him into was Lucian P. Smith, and I was concerned that he might not take it. So he hung around, they all hung around, and I called him back in, and I asked Sam point blank, does it have to be Norman? And he does his process and thinks for a minute and says, well, what are you thinking? And I said, I'm thinking Barry. And that's a hard role. It's a really hard, it's the hardest role in the play. And he knew it, and I knew it, and I knew he could do it. So he thought for a minute and then said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So there it was. The cast was settled. Lewis would be playing Norman. He would be playing Arnold. Glenn would be playing Norman. James would play Lucian. And Sam would play Barry. That was the boys. And I knew that we had actors that would do them justice as human beings, not portray them as characters. And that was very important to me. Carolyn Wong come in, and she was the only woman that read, but she was perfect for Sheila. Even if I'd had 25 million other people reading for Sheila, I would have cast Carolyn in that role. I think I had to give her one note in the whole rehearsal process because she was perfect. And I am a very interesting director. I love my actors, but I don't coddle them. I go out of my way to make sure they have everything they need for their process, but I won't do their process for them. So some actors I ride, some actors I don't. It depends upon what I feel they need. And I was taking a very hands-off approach to a lot of people, and it really irked a few of them. Brian Heaton, for example, was so used to being micromanaged early on in the process that he couldn't handle that I was letting him find his own way, and that resulted in a little friction. But we got past it. He saw what I was doing, and he's fantastic as Jack. The only other person other than Tony Goldwyn in the movie I've seen play Jack is a friend of mine named James Black, who is sort of a theater celebrity here in town, and I would put Brian's performance of Jack up against James's every single time. This group, well, I'd gotten where I actually did not like theater. I didn't want to be involved in theater. And then rewatching this archive footage really made me love theater again. That's the magic that this little ensemble cast that I put together had. They were fantastic, and I'm often asked, will I ever do another production of Boys Next Door as a director? And I can tell you emphatically, no way. I could never, ever come close to the magic that we created with this group. My vision of the play. Well, as I'd mentioned before, I had had some experience playing damaged characters, and that I'd seen the play before, and at the Alley, the regional theater here in Houston, and I had seen the movie. And for me, none of it really got what these guys were and what they're dealing with. The key for me is that these guys, yeah, they're damaged, but they don't know that they're damaged, and their lives are very rich and full. So we play them as human beings living their lives. We don't play them as jokes. We don't play them as playthings. It was a very fine line. Luckily, I got the cast. I got the cast that I didn't have to get in their heads, and well, I did a little bit for some of the darker things. We had to go there, but for them, being the person, being Lucian, being Norman, being Arnold, being Barry, they got that, and if you've got it, having been an actor, I'm not going to mess with you. You have to play this role, and you show me what you want to do with it, and then I'll figure out how what you're doing will fit into what I want to do with the play. And that's the way I direct, and that was my approach to the Boys Next Door. So the boys were fine, no problems there. Now, when it come to the physical stuff and the dark stuff in Act 2, those were some pretty tough rehearsals. That's when it was everybody involved started sharing all the damage of their past and stuff, and I usually don't like doing that at all, but it seemed appropriate with the group. We all had learned that we could trust each other, and that whatever happened in the rehearsal room stayed in the rehearsal room. So we could dig deep and explore the darkness. It was particularly with Michael Steinbach, who played Barry's father, and he stepped in at the last minute. We'd gone through 2 other people playing that part because they kept getting leads in other plays, as happens in volunteer theater. So Michael came in, and I'd never worked with Michael before, and I didn't know if he'd fit in with my style, but he did, and he was fantastic. And he also did our lighting designs for us, and was fantastic. And his wife Elaine, magnificent lady, said some very kind things about my Renfield play. In fact, she told me it was extremely well written, and you know, I'll love her till the day I die for that. She created this padding vest for him that hid his one arm completely, so the illusion was fantastic. I didn't have to do it, and it was fantastic, so I loved it. But he came in, and Michael was not Mr. Klemper. He didn't have that in him, you know. So we had to put those things in his mind that he could access to become that man, and how would that man react? Because Mr. Klemper, his damage is all self-done, and Barry also suffers from Mr. Klemper's damage. So we had to make the man a monster, but not cross the line into burlesque. It was a very fine line on every character in the play that we were doing. I also had other people playing other parts that dropped out because they got better roles. They're playing the smaller parts, and we had a young kid in the playhouse then that was kind of involved, and we just let him play those, and he did okay. He caused a lot of drama, as 17-year-old high school kids will do. And in hindsight, I wish that I would have been able to keep more adults in those roles, but he did okay. The important thing was he didn't damage the play. If he damaged the integrity of the piece, that's when he would have had to go. But he did okay. The overall vision was to present real life for these people. Act 1, it's amusing, it's fun, oh, it's cute and it's sweet. But then in Act 2, you get a glimpse under the sheets. You get to see Barry being clobbered by his dad and winding up in the insane asylum from it. I mean, that's the damage. You get to see Arnold really freaking out. You get to see Norman bullying people with his girth. And that was something Glenn didn't want to do, but I wanted him to do it because I've seen that happen with really big people of low mentality. They'll just swing their girth around to get what they want. They really do bully. The hardest one, I think, was for James, when he had to break the Lucian and become Lucian's soul. When he broke Lucian's mind and became Lucian's soul. And he was doing fine. He was doing fine. But it wasn't quite there. So I think the one note I gave him, and I sent it to him in email, because sometimes I don't want to give notes to people in person. I'd rather do it in email and then discuss it afterwards. I don't want to do it in public, like sometimes notes are given in public. The email I sent him was, James, here's your note when you're doing Lucian's speech to the Senate. Make them understand. Make them understand what it's like. And then that was it. He got it. He nailed it every night. Not a dry eye in the house the entire run when he did that. You know, I'm damaged speech. It was fantastic. Patty White, bless her, we'd gone through other people playing Miss Freemus and all that, and Rena had approached her and she came in and it's hilarious in those roles she plays. The note I gave her about Clara, because she was just going, no, 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 no. I said, well, when my sister and I were little, we used to have a secret language, but the only word in that language was oogle. So I said, think of it as Clara is speaking and saying very profound things, but she's saying it with only one word, and that word was no. And then if you watch that, you can actually see that she's carrying on a conversation and addressing Norman in a language, and it's fantastic. Some people get it, some people don't, but it was really wonderful to see. But the important thing for me was that people never laughed at these guys. They only laughed with them. And that used to be part of my opening curtain speech, and in fact, one night nobody laughed the entire play, and that's when the actors started asking me to tell people it was okay to laugh at the funny stuff. So that's the curtain speech that you see at the beginning of this tape, is that it is okay to laugh at the situations. The situations are funny. As long as you're not laughing at the people in the situations, it's fine. It's fine. So that was the important thing. And just doing a really great show. I think our total production budget for that thing was $200. We used a set from another play and repainted it. There was some friction working with the children's group. They had the stage, so we went and worked in the rehearsal room, which bothered a few of the actors, but that's just what you do in theater. You work in a rehearsal room. And we set up the actual furniture in the floor plan that would be on stage, and we rehearsed. And then when we transferred to the stage, we had a week on the stage before we started tech. No problems. Boom, boom, boom. Absolutely fantastic. Tech, first night, always trouble. But by the second night, I knew the show was ready to go. Now, the end of Act 1. Sheila and Norman and the dance. I knew it needed to be wonderful, and again, I let my actors do their thing. So I let Glenn and Carolyn come up with their dance, what they wanted to do with it, how they wanted to. They had to play it. So they showed me what they were doing, and I was just like, oh, that's fantastic. That's wonderful, and I'm going to get credit for it. Wonderful. So, and then I got home from that, and there was an email from Sam, and he'd sent me the MP3 of the Fred Astaire song, Cheek to Cheek, and asked could they dance to that. And I said, absolutely. So that was a team effort, and that came because I got the right people involved with me doing this play, and that is my secret to any successful production I do, is surrounding myself with the right people. You do that, you can't go wrong. So there it is. My final thoughts on The Boys Next Door. I had not directed a play since college. I had won some awards for directing movies and video, but that's a different process. And I was really wanting to focus on screenwriting at the time. But it came in and it said, you need to do this. So I did. And I do not regret doing it. At the end of the run, there was some friction with the theater and people in the theater about personalities and things like that, and I left the theater and never went back after this play. These things happen. Not everybody's going to get along, but it does not diminish in any way the cast, the crew, and the work that we did on The Boys Next Door. It is and always will be one of those mythic productions of community theater that if you were there, you know, and if you weren't, you wished you were. And that's fantastic. And it is due to the boys. Glenn Lambert was the foundation that I built the play upon. He's since passed on, as we know, and I miss him greatly. I had written a role for him in my Renfield movie, specifically for him. And he passed on before he could do it. Luckily, Sam Martinez was able to step in and fill that role. Also, in remembrance of Glenn in the movie, we have the cops eating donuts from the Oh Boy donut shop that Norman worked at in the play. There's all kinds of little things that if you were involved in Boys Next Door and you see the movie Renfield the Undead, you'll see them. And that's my homage to Glenn Lambert. He and I were very good friends. We got each other. We got each other's artistry, and we also understood each other's demons. And that's what a friend should be. And he was a theater friend. I wish that I would have gotten to do more shows with him, though. That is my one regret. But as far as The Boys Next Door, fantastic theater, and I challenge any amateur group to top what we did.
I see trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Well, I see skies of blue and I see clouds of white and the brightness of day. I like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say